I'm going to talk about the S3 delegation canvas. And in case you wonder what that is, it's a very simple tool for figuring out organizational structure, how to clarify and evolve and negotiate delegation of responsibility to people. It's a 10-step matrix. What you see here is a graphical representation, but you can just do it in a Word document or in a Google Doc. It's not limited to this graphical representation, and mostly this graphical representation actually gets in the way if you fill it out. So it's simplest way to do it is on a piece of paper. And before I dive into the delegation canvas, I'd like to give a very short overview what we mean by domain and delegation, because everyone has a different interpretation. So in S3, we have a definition. A domain is a distinct area of influence, activity, and decision-making within an organization. You can see that in the illustration. There's a few domains. Some are nested within other domains. Some are overlapping. And these overlaps, they happen because sometimes you have a shared area of responsibility, and sometimes people were just lazy and didn't clarify the domains well enough. Both of these things happen in real life. And these domains are delegated to people, to a group of people, as in a circle or a team or a department, or to a role or position. So there's many ways out there for developing domains to people. What's important is there's two roles. There's a delegator. That's the person or the group who's responsible for a domain, and the delegatee who takes over this responsibility from the delegator. And both the delegator and the delegatee, they are accountable for the success of the delegation. You can't say, I delegate this to you and now it's your accountability and I don't care anymore about it. In the end, when it turns sideways, both the delegator and the delegatee are responsible for the success. And this is represented in the delegation canvas. Delegation creates organizational structure because you distribute work among the people, and good delegation and good structure is essential for the effectiveness of an organization. And if you are clear in your delegation, you can enable trust and autonomy and development. And if your delegation and your clarification is poor, then you prevent trust, autonomy, and development. So the delegation canvas is there to foster shared understanding. What is my accountability or our accountability in the organization? Find a fitting balance between autonomy and influence. So if the delegator is low on trust, he will reserve most of the influence to themselves. And as that trust grows, he will give more trust to the delegates. The delegation canvas also helps you to manage dependencies between teams or roles and constraints, and it clarifies expectations. And you can use this also to develop delegation and collaboration. If you fill in such a delegation canvas, this is your hypothesis. This is the way we distribute work. And then we work for a bit and we see how that went, if that was a really good idea, and then we develop it. So you can use it to build trust and autonomy. You can use the delegation canvas. I've seen it out there, used for departments, teams, circles, open domains, roles, positions, even for tasks or projects. People fill out a delegation canvas to get a frame. What is it all about? It takes about, from experience, 45 to 60 minutes. Sometimes you can do it in half an hour, but there is a lot of discussion involved, and it's worth the time, actually, because then you use it for a couple of weeks or months. So taking that initial investment is not very high. You can use it for existing domains with something I call a delegation game. I will explain that at the end of the session. And you can use it for setting up new domains. And I would encourage you to start small. If you find something, if you find a field in the canvas where you say, why should I fill this in now? Just don't. Just use what you think brings value, and you can still add the rest later. So there's 10 steps in the delegation to canvas. The first one is the primary driver or the mission, where you explain why the domains exists. So the delegator and the delegatee, ideally they sit together and discuss this. Why do we have this domain? The next is the key responsibilities. So what are the top 3 responsibilities of the delegate? And if you do this, if people think about these responsibilities and they each individually and they bring it on the table, you will see that people have a totally different expectation of the domain. So bringing these together is a very valuable process. The third step is the key challenges. Try to think about what is the 3 biggest things that can get in the way. Is there a risk? Is there a deficit? Is there uncertainties? Do we lack some essential skill or resources? So I forget what there's a name for the practice of trying to figure out 3 things that can go wrong. If you can find out 3 things that can go wrong, you haven't understood the problem. So this is the inspiration for the key challenges. Then there's constraints, and constraints are usually from the organization. They're more or less artificial. So a constraint could be you have to hand in a report of your progress every 2 weeks, or you just get $50 as a budget, or you always have, for that kind of decision, you always have to ask your boss. These are key constraints that you would enter in a delegation canvas. Then there's key deliverables. So what are you actually doing? What are the products and services that you use to meet the key responsibilities and the key challenges? What are you actually giving back to the rest of the organization? Then there's a section about delegator responsibilities. So how can I, as a delegator, contribute to the success of the delegatees? Am I there for questions 2 hours a week? Do I get together with them and hold workshops or whatever? So it's a reminder that the delegator has a key input on the success, and they can't just hand something over to somebody else and run away and go golfing. Then we think about key metrics. How do we measure success? And the best thing here is metrics that you don't take at the end of the evaluation period, but metrics that are available as you go, that are very simple to take, so you can always see how good am I doing. So you're not surprised at the end that things turn sideways. Actionable metrics, how it's called in the Lean Startup method. This is the way to go here. Then you have key resources, what you give to people to do their job. Sometimes it's money, sometimes it's privileges or assets they get, access to some things. This needs to be laid out here. Then you will have evaluations, and you need to be specific how they are conducted, when they are happening, who will be present. Are they maybe a peer review with some external stakeholders, or are they internal, bi-weekly, 3 monthly, whatever. Just be clear and specific so you can plan for these things. And then you list the dependencies. Who's your customers and who's your providers? From whom do you take over things, and who has which expectations on the outside? And you will find, as you fill these things, if you're if you're talking about dependencies, you will find things that you have forgotten in the key deliverables or in the key metrics. So this is not a linear process. This is just a suggested order, but you will get back to other sections and figure out things that you lost. And this is the idea. It should give you a 360-degree view of this delegation. So basically a checklist that you don't forget anything, that you think the things through in the beginning before you start. And then when you develop this delegation, you get back to it and get again this checklist and expand on this delegation canvas. Our suggested way of going about the development is doing a peer review. That's a pattern that's in Sociocracy 3.0, and it's also in SCM in a bit of a different way. And so you co-create learning in this peer review together, and you co-create a development plan and use what you learned to update the delegation canvas to clarify how the domain is cut after this, after you worked on it for a while and learned a bit. So, and then there's the delegation game. This is something you can use to define and delegate a new domain, but you can also use this in an existing situation. So if somebody has a position, or you already have a team or a department or a role, you can use that to reveal misconception about an existing domain and create this shared understanding and clarify and document the domain. And what you do is, it's very simple. You bring together the delegator and the delegatees, give a delegation canvas to each of them, and let them fill out the delegation canvas in silence, individually. And then you go through each of the sections and compare notes, and then you agree what this section actually should say. And you will see that you sometimes get really wildly different canvases from this. And this is a good thing, because then you can actually clarify expectation and collaborate much more closely. It's a really fun exercise. You can do this with a new hire, for example, or you can even do a delegation game in a job interview. It's also an interesting interesting situation if you do this. To complement that canvas, we have two more. We have the team canvas that explains more the team side of things, the people side of things, and not the organizational side. And there's also the organization canvas that gives a high-level bird's perspective on an organization. All of these things you can find on the website, Sociocracy 3.0org/S3 Canvas. And we also have some complementary materials that explain a bit more on the wider picture that we use to create these canvases. So that's it from my side, and I would just go to the questions. My use of constraints as different as in theory of constraints, in which identifying constraints is crucial, so resources can be directed to maximize throughput at a primary bottleneck. Well, I use constraints in a broader sense here. It's just the limitations we put on this domain, mostly influenced through the, or mostly influenced from the organizational side of things. So theory of constraints would also apply to the key challenges, for example. And we divided that up into two things: the challenges that are the basically constraints inherent in the task or in the domain, and the key constraints are constraints that come from the way the organization is laid out at the moment. So a key constraint would be this thing is not in your domain because that's already in the domain of somebody else. So you have to ask them about everything that is not. If you read the primary driver from a delegation canvas, all the things that are not part of the domain, but you would think they are if you just read the primary driver. This goes to the key constraints. Does that explain a bit this distinction between theory of constraints and the plain English word I just used here? So the canvas on the S3 website has a slightly different structure and lists different categories. Did you simply show the latest version and the one on the website is a bit older? Yes, I did. Probably I forgot to update this. We have a microsite for this where the other site should actually redirect to, and so you're probably looking at an older version. I just make a note to fix this. I can just ping you a link that should be to the latest version. So, the explanation of the canvas was helpful. I don't find the S3 canvas self-explanatory. Are there video explanations? No, there are no video explanations, but there are text explanations on the site I just linked to you. And but it's a good idea to have a video explanation. Yeah. I'll do that. I think that would be pretty simple. So, good. Didn't I share the link? I didn't share the link with everyone. That's really stupid. So now, there you go. Good. But I'll also fix the other link so you see the same thing wherever you click in a couple of minutes. Good. Any more questions? Inspirations? Thoughts? Maybe one thing I forgot to mention, you can use this canvas in basically every organization. It doesn't have any assumptions on how the organization is laid out or governed, if it's a hierarchy or an egalitarian whatever, or if it's a corporation or a small startup. If it uses sociocracy or not, that's really not important. You can use it basically everywhere. What's a good time to use the canvas? At the start of a circle or after some time, or when there are overlapping domains? Whenever you think it's a good idea. The best time to use the canvas is yesterday. The second best time is today. But as you see fit, if you have an overlapping domains and you're getting into trouble with that, that's a good way of using the canvas. And if you start a circle, if you start a new circle, it's also a really good idea to use it, because then everyone is on the same page. Is there an opportunity built into S3 to explore whether a domain is optimally defined? Yes. Whenever you do a peer review, you would look at a domain description, at a role description, and this is when you review it and see, is it still good enough? Is this still what we understand? So whenever you do an evaluation, you should also evaluate the domain description or the canvas. But probably a domain is never optimally defined. It always changes. The situation changes, the people change, you learn something. So when you do the next review, you're probably going to find something that you might want to change. So, is the canvas similar to the business model canvas. You don't see that, but here the organization canvas is influenced by the business model canvas and by the lean canvas. The canvas templates, they actually in the license they reference that they're built on the lean and the business model canvas. The delegation canvas is not directly built on this. It's a bit different because you're looking at a different piece of the organization. So there is, I think, the key challenges there also in the lean canvas, but I'm not sure at the moment. Canvas is just a way to structure thinking, discussion, and documentation. Exactly. That's it. Yeah. It's just a template that you fill in to assist you in thinking. That's a very acute observation.